I built a fence. She called 911. I wanted peace. She declared war. One day, Cheryl Maddox was waving from her porch with a latte and a Labrador, and the next she was screaming about community violations, like I'd installed a missile silo. When I locked the gate, she unlocked her crazy. I thought I was just blocking a footpath. Turns out I'd accidentally shut down her personal freeway through my yard, and her ego. What I thought was a home improvement project turned out to be a direct challenge to Maplewood Ridge's self-appointed queen of order. And Cheryl? She doesn't lose gracefully, especially not when her shortcut to superiority gets shut. Drop a comment where you watching from, because the real reason she was using my yard? It's gonna slap you sideways. That Monday morning, I started digging my first post hole with nothing on my mind but a little backyard privacy and maybe a cold beer afterward. I'd spent 10 years on warehouse night shifts, eating vending machine dinners and stashing every dime so I could finally buy a home with a little grass to call my own. Maplewood Ridge looked clean and quiet until the drama started flapping its arms across the property line like a flamingo in heat. My fence wasn't even halfway up when I saw Cheryl, arms crossed, eyebrows arched like she was about to audition for Law and Order HOA unit. Now, Cheryl wasn't your average neighbor, no. She was the kind who walks her dog in pearls and sends friendly reminders about trash bin placement with printed color photos. Before I moved in, she'd been cutting across my backyard like it was her morning meditation path. I found out later the old owner never dared to say anything. He just let her roam like it was a safari. So, when she strutted up on Tuesday expecting business as usual and met my new keypad gate instead, she froze. The woman stood there in her yoga outfit, shaking the gate like it owed her rent. "What is this?" she gasped, like I'd erected the Berlin Wall. "This is completely inappropriate. We're a community, Marcus." I watched her from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, wondering how a 6-foot fence could cause a woman to unravel like a cheap sweater in a rainstorm. By noon, she had declared digital war. Maplewood's neighborhood group, usually just recipes and lost cat posts, exploded into a multi-thread opera called Marcus's Wall. She posted blurry surveillance-level pictures of my fence from every possible angle and demanded the HOA take action. She used words like divisive, unneighborly, and my favorite, architectural assault. One of her posts claimed fences like mine fracture the soul of suburban life. Meanwhile, I was just hoping my fence would keep squirrels from using my patio like a casino. Some folks chimed in, agreeing with her, but more just asked the obvious, why is she in his yard in the first place? One guy asked if the fence had barbed wire. Cheryl replied, emotionally, yes. I nearly choked on my sandwich. Then came the warning letter. Not even 24 hours after Cheryl's meltdown, I get a formal notice from the Maplewood HOA citing possible style inconsistencies and placement concerns. It read like a rejection from a fashion magazine. I double-checked everything, my permits, measurements, even the HOA booklet I had to read 3 times because it was written like IKEA instructions. Everything was legit. I had dotted every I and fenced every inch legally. That's when Trevor Boone, my neighbor 2 doors down, sent me a message. Watch out. She did this to the Johnsons. They moved out. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was up against a seasoned manipulator who'd been terrorizing the cul-de-sac like it was her personal Game of Thrones set. And me? I'd just built a wall right through her delusions of control, but I wasn't moving. Not after 10 years of busted knuckles and skipped vacations. I just poured another cup of coffee, pulled out my permits, and whispered the only words that felt right. Let's dance, Cheryl. If you've never been tried in the court of public opinion, congratulations, you've lived a good life. But me? I got my hearing before the gavel even had a chance to drop. Cheryl turned Maplewood Ridge's social group into her personal courtroom, and I was the villain of the week. My fence, labeled a community divider, my gate, a psychological barrier to togetherness, and the woman who had been trespassing for who knows how long, suddenly a martyr, grieving the loss of neighborhood flow like I'd rerouted a sacred river, She even posted an old photo of my yard before the fence, captioned, "What we used to be." You'd think I bulldozed a dog park. And the likes? Oh, they came flying in. Most were pity clicks, I'm sure, but enough to make a man question if he'd accidentally put up an electric fence around his soul. I knew then this wasn't about lumber. This was about leverage. Within a day, I had a shiny new HOA warning letter on my porch, typed. Folded just so. "We have received concerns from residents regarding your recent structural addition. Please provide documentation verifying compliance." No names, no sources, just vague concerns, like my fence had whispered something dirty in Cheryl's ear. Now, mind you, I'd submitted everything. Permits, drawings, even the paint code for my neutral brown stain. But somehow, Cheryl's keyboard had more power than the actual rulebook. It was like watching a magician pull regulations out of a hat, except the rabbit had a clipboard and wore too much perfume. That letter wasn't about rules. It was a message. Cheryl was reminding me this neighborhood runs on appearances, not facts. And in Maplewood, appearances have a Facebook login and a dangerously loose interpretation of truth. The moment that letter hit my mailbox, my phone buzzed. It was Trevor Boone, 2 houses down and built like a linebacker who's good with gutters. "You got the letter?" he messaged. "She did the same thing to the Johnsons." I didn't know much about the Johnsons, just that their house had turned over a year before I moved in. Turns out they had a toddler, wanted a safe space, built a modest fence, and that was enough to set Cheryl off like a firework on dry grass. She started filing complaints, spreading rumors, even told the neighborhood their baby was a noise disruption. Trevor said she made their lives so miserable they packed up and left. Cheryl called it restoring the aesthetic integrity of the block. I called it something else, but I'll let you fill in that blank. It hit me right then. Cheryl wasn't just difficult. She was strategic. She didn't use facts, she used fear. She turned neighbor against neighbor with little more than hashtags and horror stories, all while painting herself as the guardian of Maplewood's values. And me? I was the new kid who didn't know the script. I thought fences were about privacy, she thought they were acts of defiance, and now I was getting the full Johnson treatment. But here's the thing. I'm not the Johnsons. I didn't spend 10 years of my life surviving soul-sucking shifts to be run off by a woman who thinks a fence is a threat to democracy. Cheryl may have ruled Facebook court, but I had something she didn't expect. Time, patience, and a digital folder labeled just in case. I started saving everything. Screenshots, timestamps, permit receipts, every comment, every message, every little digital breadcrumb she dropped in her quest for HOA domination. Because when someone starts a war over a 6-foot fence, you better believe it's not about the fence. It's about control. And the more I watched her, the more I realized this wasn't just a neighborhood spat. This was a play she'd starred in before. But this time, the audience was bigger, and I was going to make sure the ending didn't go the way she'd written it. Part 3 gets even weirder. You'll want to hear what showed up on my doorstep next. You ever feel like you followed every rule to the letter, only to be treated like you forged the Constitution? That's where I found myself a few days after the Facebook drama hit full steam. I came home from work, still in my steel Tui boots, to find a man in a wrinkled polo shirt snooping around my yard with a clipboard and a face full of disapproval. No badge, no uniform, just a laminated card he flashed faster than a magician on Red Bull. Said he was with the Neighborhood Compliance Committee, which, spoiler alert, isn't a real thing. He pointed at my fence like it had personally insulted his mother, then started scribbling furiously while muttering phrases like possible height infraction and non-standard grain pattern. I asked for his credentials, and he said, "Oh, I don't have business cards on me." "Yeah, and I don't have patience for clowns in khakis." I stood there watching him circle my yard like he was filming an episode of CSI Cedar Plank Edition. The dude had no ID, no real authority, and enough nervous energy to suggest he'd been coached by someone with a personal vendetta. So naturally, I pulled out my phone and started filming. The moment he noticed, he scurried off like I'd flipped on the kitchen light in a Roach motel. Not 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Trevor, but a new name. Dana Willis. She was on the HOA board, quiet at meetings, always polite, never dramatic. Her message said, "Watch yourself. Cheryl's done this before. She used a fake inspector on the Johnsons, too." Apparently, the same playbook was still in circulation. Different year, same scare tactics. Then came the cherry on top of the suburban harassment sundae. 2 days later, at 6 in the morning, someone started pounding on my front door like I owed them child support and alimony. Half awake and barefoot, I opened the door to 2 police officers looking both bored and slightly annoyed. "Sir," the older one said, flipping his notepad, "we received a call about unpermitted construction, something about a fence built without approval and posing a hazard to public safety." I blinked. Twice. "This fence?" I asked, pointing to my clearly stable, clearly legal structure, built with more precision than some houses I've seen. The younger officer was already glancing over it, and I could tell by his face he'd been dragged into something ridiculous for the 3rd time that week. I invited them in, handed over my big blue folder of documents, permits, receipts, even HOA correspondence. The older cop nodded, the younger one almost laughed. "Yeah," he muttered, flipping through the papers. "This is the 3rd fence call we've had in this neighborhood this year. Same complainant every time. No names needed. Cheryl's fingerprints were all over it. Metaphorically, of course. She's too careful to leave actual evidence." After 10 minutes and 2 cups of awkward silence, the officers left with a few tired warnings about keeping documentation handy and some people just have too much time. I stood in the doorway, holding my coffee, wondering when following the rules became an act of rebellion. That's when it clicked for me. Cheryl wasn't just angry, she was threatened. My fence wasn't a fence, it was a tripwire to her war chest. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood, she was protecting her illusion of control. And every nail I hammered reminded her she wasn't in charge of everything. But if she thought a fake inspector and an early morning police visit were enough to make me fold, she hadn't done her homework. I'd been broke, exhausted, and ignored for most of my adult life. But scared? Not today. And not over a fence. Stick around, because what she did next, that's when I knew this wasn't just personal, it was psychological warfare. At some point I realized logic wasn't going to win this war, but comedy might. Cheryl kept trying to turn my life into a soap opera, so I figured it was time to give her the laugh track she deserved. That's when I installed the motion-activated speaker on my gate. Every time someone got within 5 feet, it would cheerfully say, "Thanks, Cheryl, your visit's been recorded for security purposes. Have a great day." I even made sure it had that chipper, automated customer service tone. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't rude, but it was absolutely petty enough to make her blood boil. And that was the goal, because when someone starts staging fake compliance visits and dragging cops to your doorstep before sunrise, you get a little creative with your boundaries. Sure enough, the next morning she strutted past with her power-walking crew, trying to act like she wasn't checking if I'd added anything new, and boom! The speaker hit her. "Thanks, Cheryl." You'd think she'd been hit with pepper spray. She froze, whipped her head around like she'd been ambushed, then pulled out her phone like it was a weapon. Within 10 minutes, Cheryl was live-streaming from the sidewalk in front of my house, face full of fury, phone at eye level, wearing what looked like her TV appearance blazer. I kid you not, she had ring lights in her hands, 2 of them, like she'd just come from filming an episode of Real Housewives of Maplewood Ridge. I watched from the kitchen as she gave her Oscar speech to her 38 live viewers. "This is psychological warfare," she sobbed, pointing at my speaker like it had launched an airstrike. "This man has turned our peaceful neighborhood into a surveillance state. He's mocking community spirit." My neighbor, Ruthie Nash, was across the street watering her roses, and I saw her shake her head so hard I thought her visor would fly off. And here's where it got really good. While Cheryl was dramatically gesturing and monologuing about safety violations, the speaker went off again. "Thanks, Cheryl." Her face cracked like a porcelain plate. She tried to keep going, but the comment section had already turned against her. One viewer asked, "Why does the message say thank you if it's harassment?" Another wrote, "It's polite. You're the one standing outside someone else's gate." By that afternoon, the live video had been shared around the neighborhood, and even some of her usual defenders started to backpedal. The optics weren't great. A grown woman yelling at a pre-recorded speaker while her neighbors side-eyed her in bathrobes? Not exactly the heroic narrative she was hoping for. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, Dana, our quiet HOA board member, decided she'd had enough. That evening I got a forwarded message from Dana, complete with attachments. It was a PDF titled Pattern of Harassment, the Cheryl Maddox HOA Chronicles. Inside were screenshots, old emails, and written statements from past neighbors who had also built fences and been driven out. Turns out I wasn't her first rodeo, just the first one with a speaker that talked back. Suddenly, it wasn't just me who saw her clearly. The neighborhood had been tiptoeing around Cheryl for years, but now the veil was slipping. She wasn't the guardian of Maplewood charm. She was a self-appointed dictator with a Facebook page and a knack for theatrical lighting. And while she was busy writing her next public statement, I was getting ready for mine. Because next, she tried to frame me for selling my own house. And that, my friend, is where things took a seriously bizarre turn. Don't miss it. Just when I thought Cheryl had maxed out her HOA Madness credit card, she pulled a stunt that made me question whether I was living in a neighborhood or filming an episode of Dateline Suburbia. I came home from work one afternoon to find a bright, shiny real estate sign planted right next to my fence. Professional-looking, branded, with a for sale banner hanging like a slap in the face. My name was on it. My phone wasn't. I stood there, staring at it, trying to figure out if I was sleepwalking through my own financial decisions. Spoiler, I wasn't. And that sign? I hadn't ordered it. Cheryl, on the other hand, was watching from her upstairs window like a hawk that had just released a mouse onto a trap. I took the sign down calmly, but my blood pressure was tapping on the ceiling tiles. 5 minutes later, I spotted a man in a beat-up Camry parked across the street, snapping photos of me pulling out the sign. I recognized the car. Susan's husband's golf buddy. This woman wasn't just fabricating drama now. She was directing it. A few minutes later, a neighbor texted me a screenshot from the community page. Someone had posted the photo of me with the sign captioned, "Looks like Marcus is giving up. Shame about the community." And the comments? A mix of, "He never belonged here anyway," and, "Guess the fence didn't work out." You'd think I was a traitor who sold our secrets to a rival cul-de-sac. That's when I decided to do what Cheryl never expected. Fight back with facts. I called the number on the fake sign. A receptionist answered, polite and professional, until I asked about the supposed listing. Her tone changed fast. She said, "Funny you're calling. We thought it was odd. The person who called sounded like they were trying to imitate someone, but it didn't feel right." I asked if they recorded the call. "For training and quality assurance," she said. Jackpot. Meanwhile, Trevor, who once ran a small tech repair business, offered to help trace the digital trail. We pulled the website registration for the listing and, surprise, it had only existed for 2 days. The fake email tied to it? Registered under a burner domain with an IP address, you guessed it, matching Cheryl's home network. The real estate agency was kind enough to send over the call transcript and recording. I listened to someone pretending to be me, using phrases like, "I wish to divest promptly due to undesirable community dynamics." Undesirable community dynamics? I say yard and back porch, not divest. It was like hearing a robot version of myself written by someone who's only seen humans on TV. The voice didn't even match mine, but it didn't have to. All it had to do was stir the pot, throw in enough doubt to get people whispering again. But this time, I had receipts. Real, verifiable, court-worthy receipts, and Cheryl had no idea how badly she'd just overplayed her hand. I compiled the IP logs, the call recording, and screenshots of the sign, the post, and the guy in the car, side by side like a suburban conspiracy board. I even added timestamps. and a snarky little title at the top. The Curious Case of the Vanishing Property Owner. Because at this point, we weren't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. We were dealing with a one-woman TMZ with a criminal flair. And the best part? I wasn't even close to done collecting evidence, because as wild as this was, her next move made everything before it look like kindergarten politics. Keep watching. This story's just getting warmed up. You ever walk into a room and know the air's about to change? That was the Maplewood HOA emergency meeting, held in the community rec room, which usually smelled like dusty bingo chips and old coffee. But that night, it smelled like war. Cheryl was already there, front and center, holding a USB stick like it was the nuclear football. She had a PowerPoint queued up, the Marcus problem, complete with a title slide that looked like it was designed by a stressed-out intern during a caffeine crash. Her supporters, or what was left of them, sat in a neat semicircle like the jury in a reality show trial. And me? I walked in with a flash drive of my own, a manila folder thick with receipts. And Trevor, right behind me, carrying a laptop like it was the gospel. Cheryl started the show with tears, always with the tears, and a speech about neighborhood values being under siege. She clicked through slides showing my fence from every possible angle, each one framed like it was a before and after photo from a disaster relief brochure. She accused me of dividing the community, of triggering hostility, of launching a privacy movement. Apparently, wanting to enjoy your backyard in peace now qualifies as ideological warfare. The real kicker? She claimed I'd abused technological tools to harass her, meaning the speaker that said, "Thank you, Cheryl." It was like listening to someone who watched too many courtroom dramas but skipped the parts about evidence. When it was my turn, I didn't say a word. I just plugged in my drive and clicked play. First up, footage of the fake inspector snooping around with no credentials. Next, audio from the real estate call where someone tried and failed to impersonate me. Then the IP logs that traced the fake email right back to Cheryl's own Wi-Fi network. The projector lit up her lies like a crime scene under a blacklight. In the room, silent. People who'd once nodded at her sidewalk sermons now looked like they were watching a live exorcism. Even her most loyal foot soldiers began to squirm. A few shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One guy coughed so hard it sounded like regret leaving his lungs. Then came the moment that cracked the dam. Ruthie Nash, sweet, quiet Ruthie from across the street, stood up. This woman hadn't spoken in a meeting since I moved in. She adjusted her cardigan, cleared her throat, and said, "Cheryl's been lying to all of you for years." The room tilted. She went on to describe how Cheryl had blocked her from planting a memorial tree for her late husband because it violated landscape uniformity. She'd kept the rejection letter printed, highlighted, still in the original envelope. "That fence," Ruthie said, pointing at me, "didn't divide us. It protected him, and Cheryl hated that." That sentence landed like a gavel. I wasn't just the new guy with a smart mouthgate anymore. I was a symbol of every neighbor Cheryl had silenced. The HOA board sat there, stunned. Dana looked like she wanted to cry and punch something at the same time. Cheryl? Her face froze into a porcelain mask, like a kid caught cheating on a test but still trying to act like they had the right answer. She opened her mouth to protest, but this time no one leaned in to listen. The loudest voice in the room had finally been turned down, and for once, the quiet ones, Ruthie, Dana, even the fence itself, got to speak louder than the noise. What happened next? Let's just say Cheryl wasn't done, but neither was I. Because her next move? It was desperate, and that's when desperate people start making mistakes. You won't believe what she did next. If this part of the story hit home or reminded you of someone going through something similar, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend. Send it to someone who's ever dealt with a petty power trip or fought for their right to just live in peace. And if you've got thoughts, I want to hear them. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Because trust me, we're just getting to the good part. You'd think after being publicly fact-checked in front of her whole fan club, Cheryl would tap out gracefully. But, nah, she doubled down like a bad gambler on a cold streak. 2 days after the HOA meeting, she showed up at my door with the same energy as a kid who just got caught cheating and swears the test was rigged. She was holding a tree branch, a broken one, from her prized Japanese maple. Tears ready, voice trembling, she pointed at me and said, "You did this. You vandalized my tree." "Ma'am, I was at work, and unless I've learned to teleport with pruning shears, there was no way I was the culprit." But she wasn't looking for logic. She was building her next scene, and this time she brought the cops again. When the officers arrived, I already had my footage queued up. I'd upgraded my security system after her fake-for-sale stunt, and thank God for that. I pulled out the tablet and showed them the time-stamped video from 5:30 that morning. Cheryl creeping into her backyard, twisting the branch off herself, looking around like she was auditioning for CSI Maplewood. The older officer sighed so loud it could have passed for a leaf blower. "Ma'am," he said, "filing a false report is a serious offense." Cheryl sputtered something about deep fakes, but the resolution was too good and her pajamas were too familiar. The irony? She screamed about surveillance for weeks, then got caught on camera being her own criminal. But Cheryl wasn't done embarrassing herself. Nope. She recruited a witness, a man I'd never seen on this side of the neighborhood before, who claimed he saw me sneaking around Cheryl's yard late at night with tree-cutting equipment and a look of malice. His story was so specific it sounded rehearsed, and it was. Trevor recognized the guy from his country club bartending days. He was Cheryl's husband's old business buddy. Greg snapped a photo of them having coffee 2 days earlier, huddled over a folder, Cheryl pointing and nodding like she was giving stage directions. When Trevor posted the pic to the community page with the caption, "Great place to fabricate justice," it caught fire. Within hours, the post was flooded with laughing emojis and popcorn gifs. The meme that followed said it all. When your HOA drama turns into HBO. Suddenly, the power Cheryl had clung to, with her perfectly manicured claws, started slipping. The fake witness deleted his social media. Ruthie started telling her garden club everything. Dana shared the photo timeline of Cheryl's greatest manipulations, including the time she tried to ban Halloween decorations for being spiritually disruptive. Her supporters, now fully embarrassed, vanished into quiet sympathy or full silence. And Cheryl? She went live again, because she never learns. This time, it was a plea for community empathy, featuring sad piano music in the background and a close-up of her tearful face. She blamed digital harassment and targeted bullying, but just as she declared herself the real victim, my gate speaker went off again. "Thanks, Cheryl. Your visit's been recorded." The camera caught her flinch. The internet caught everything else. If Poetic Justice had a fan club, it showed up that week. People started adding captions to her live stream, turning it into a mockumentary. One neighbor edited together all her greatest meltdowns, syncing them to dramatic music. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth was moving faster than her lies could keep up, and for once the community wasn't scared of her, they were tired of her. All those years of whispered threats and backroom complaints, they were finally catching up to her, and Cheryl was cracking like a frozen garden gnome in July. But her final move? Oh, it was wild, and if you've stuck with me this far, trust me, you'll want to see how she tried to make it all go away with one last desperate letter. Part 8. It's the finale, and it's a good one. The letter showed up on my porch like a final boss in a video game. Thick paper, shiny letterhead, and a legal tone so aggressive it nearly bit through the envelope. It claimed I owed $10,000 0 cents in damages, plus mandatory fence removal or I'd face civil escalation. The signature? A lawyer Cheryl swore represented the HOA, but when I looked up the law firm, their address was a shared P.O. box, their website had stock photos of handshakes, and the bar number? Suspended 2 years ago. Cheryl wasn't bluffing anymore, she was forging. So I did the only thing that made sense. I lawyered up. Patricia Anderson, a no-nonsense attorney recommended by Trevor's cousin, took one look at the letter and chuckled like she'd just read a third grader's attempt at blackmail. "I've dealt with her before," she said, "and this time she's stepped in something she can't wipe off." Patricia filed a formal cease and desist, along with a state bar complaint and a fraud report. Turns out Cheryl had been faking HOA authority for years, making up rules, printing phony violations, and even collecting fake compliance fines from anyone too scared to ask questions. Dana helped dig into old records and discovered Cheryl was never officially elected to anything. She just showed up to one meeting 5 years ago and never left. Within days, the real HOA board, yes, they existed, voted her out, scrubbed her name from everything, and turned over evidence to the district attorney. Cheryl was facing charges for harassment, forgery, and identity manipulation. The woman who once controlled the entire neighborhood with a smirk and a printed notice now had more court dates than committee meetings. And Maplewood Ridge, well, it finally exhaled. Ruthie Nash, cardigan queen and neighborhood saint, got approval to plant her memorial garden, front and center. She chose the same Japanese maple Cheryl once weaponized and surrounded it with her husband's favorite flowers. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Trevor installed solar lights. Dana brought lemonade. I provided the speakers system, now updated to say, "Welcome to Maplewood, petty politics not permitted." And then came the party. The whole block showed up with folding chairs and side dishes, the kind of gathering Cheryl always claimed to host but never managed without judgment and sign-up sheets. Someone even made T-shirts that said, "Fence Strong." Midway through the celebration, Ruthie called me over and handed me a small wooden sign, hand-carved, painted with care, and sealed like a piece of art. It read, "Maplewood's Backbone." I'll admit, I choked up a little, not because I needed the attention, but because it meant they'd finally seen through the noise. My fence didn't divide the neighborhood, it exposed the real cracks, the ones running through trust, silence, and fake authority. And somehow, by hammering a few nails, I helped the whole block start healing. Cheryl had built an empire out of fear. All I did was build a fence. And it tore her kingdom down, plank by plank. If this story meant something to you, or if you know someone battling a fake authority figure who hides behind rules they invent, share this video with them. Let em know they're not alone. And if you've got your own battle scars, I want to hear about them. Drop a comment and let's remind each other that standing your ground doesn't require a badge. Just a backbone. I still sit on that same back porch most evenings, feet up, coffee in hand, just watching the fence catch the golden light before sunset. But now I see more than wood and nails. I see something that used to be rare around here. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground, not with anger but with truth. I didn't fight Cheryl with more drama. I fought her with facts, friends, and a little bit of humor. And in the end, it wasn't just about protecting my property. It was about protecting a principle. Your home should be the one place no bully can touch. And here's what I hope you carry with you from all this. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're declarations of worth. That fence didn't make me distant. It made things honest. It showed people where the line was, and that it was okay to say no when someone tries to climb over it with a clipboard and a condescending smile. What started as a simple weekend project became a turning point for the whole neighborhood. Not because I was looking for a fight, but because I finally stopped avoiding one. And maybe, just maybe, someone else out there needs to know they can do the same. If this story reminded you of a battle you fought, or one you're still fighting, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's facing down their own Cheryl. Let them know they're not crazy, they're not alone, and no, they're not the problem. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. I read every one. And if you believe in stories like this, stories about everyday folks standing up, pushing back, and changing the game one voice at a time, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because we've got more fences to build, more nonsense to expose, and more justice to deliver. Oh! And before you go, I want to hear from you. What kind of story should we take on next? Another wild HOA takedown? A workplace power shift? A small town scandal that flips everything upside down? Drop your ideas in the comments, or hit up the community tab if you're watching this from the channel. I'm always on the lookout for the next unbelievable story that hits close to home and makes you say, "Oh, no, they didn't." You've helped build this channel into something real. Now help guide where it goes next. Your story idea might just become our next headline episode. So don't forget, comment, like, and subscribe. The next fence we build might just be yours.